In September of 2022, one of the most successful businessmen in America gave his company away. Not sold it, not took it public, gave it away. The company was Patagonia, worth around $3 billion. The man was Yvon Chouinard, and he had spent most of his life trying not to be a businessman at all. He didn't hand it to his children. He didn't sell to a competitor. He transferred ownership to a trust and a non-profit, with one instruction: every dollar of profit that isn't reinvested in the company goes to fighting the climate crisis. Roughly $100 million a year, given away, forever. The letter he wrote to explain it ended with a single line: "Earth is now our only shareholder." To understand why a billionaire would do that, you have to go back almost 70 years, to a teenager teaching himself to work a blacksmith's forge. Yvon Chouinard grew up the son of French-Canadian immigrants, a small, shy kid who felt most at home outdoors. By the late 1950s, he had become something rare: a serious rock climber, part of a scruffy crew living out of cars in Yosemite Valley, climbing walls nobody had climbed before. There was just one problem: the gear was terrible. The pitons, the metal spikes climbers hammer into cracks to protect a fall, were made of soft iron. You drove one into the rock, and because you couldn't get it back out, you left it there. For a climber doing big new routes, that meant buying hundreds of them. So Chouinard did something practical. In 1957, he bought a used coal-fired forge, taught himself blacksmithing, and started making his own pitons out of hard steel. Strong enough to hammer in, pull out, and use again. He made them in his parents' backyard, then sold them out of the trunk of his car for $1.50 each, driving up and down the California coast from one climbing area to the next. Chouinard never set out to build a company. He wanted to climb, and the gear making was just how he funded the next trip. But his pitons were better than anything else available, and word spread. Climbers wanted them faster than one man with a forge could make them. Through the 1960s, the backyard operation grew into a real business called Chouinard Equipment, run out of a battered tin shed in Ventura, California. By the early 70s, it had become the largest supplier of climbing hardware in the United States. It made Chouinard a modest living, but it left him uneasy. He thought of himself as a craftsman and a climber, not a captain of industry. If this story is already pulling you in, subscribe. There's a new build here every few days. That discomfort with his own success would turn out to matter, because around this time, Chouinard noticed something out on the rock that would make him question the entire business he had built. By the early 1970s, climbing had exploded in popularity, and the same pitons that made Chouinard's name were now hammered into the same popular cracks over and over by thousands of climbers. He went back to climb a route he had done years earlier, called the Nose, and saw what was happening. The rock was scarred. The repeated driving and removing of hard steel pitons was chewing the granite apart, leaving the cliffs pocked and broken. Chouinard's best-selling product was destroying the very thing he loved. Most people would have looked away. The pitons were the heart of the business. Instead, in 1972, he made a decision that should have been commercial suicide. He announced in his own catalog that the company would phase out pitons, and pushed climbers toward aluminum chocks, wedges you place by hand and remove without a hammer, leaving no mark. He devoted the front of the catalog to an essay on what he called clean climbing. He was telling his own customers to stop buying his most profitable product, and they listened. Within months, chocks were selling faster than he could make them. The clean climbing gamble taught Chouinard something he never forgot: that doing the right thing and doing good business were not always opposites. But hardware was a hard way to make a living. The breakthrough came, as it often did for him, from a personal frustration. On a climbing trip to Scotland, Chouinard bought a rugby shirt, tough, with a collar that kept a pack strap off his neck. Back home, fellow climbers kept asking where he got it. So he started importing them. The shirts sold out. He realized that clothing could fund the parts of the business he cared about, without tearing up mountains to do it. In 1973, he launched a separate clothing brand and named it after the wild, faraway region at the bottom of South America, Patagonia. The early products were simple: rugby shirts, canvas pants, weatherproof gear for people who actually went outside. But Chouinard's instinct as a craftsman pushed the clothing somewhere new. He wanted to make things that worked better than anything else, and that would last. Through the 1980s, Patagonia got two things very right. First, the products were genuinely better. The company pioneered synthetic fleece, taking a polyester fabric and turning it into a soft, warm, fast-drying jacket that became known as chinchilla. It introduced capilline, an underlayer that pulled sweat off the skin instead of soaking it up. Outdoor people noticed. These weren't gimmicks, they worked in the cold and the wet, and they lasted for years. Second, the brand felt different. Patagonia wasn't selling status. It was selling a way of being in the world, competent, understated, a little rebellious. The colorful fleeces became a uniform, first for climbers and skiers, then for everyone. Sales climbed fast. By the end of the decade, the company was doing over $100 million a year and growing more than 30% annually. To almost any other founder, this was the dream. To Chouinard, the breakneck growth was starting to feel like a warning. And in 1991, the warning came true. In the early 90s, a recession hit the United States, and Patagonia's customers stopped spending. But the deeper problem was self-inflicted. The company had been growing so fast it had overexpanded. Too much inventory, too many new lines, a sales forecast built on the assumption that the boom would never end. When the bank suddenly cut Patagonia's credit, the company was caught badly exposed. For the first time, Chouinard faced the real possibility that the thing he had built could simply collapse. On a single day in 1991, the company laid off 120 people, about 20% of its workforce. Many of them were friends. For Chouinard, who had always treated the place like a family, it was the worst day of his working life. He later said it forced him to confront a question he had been avoiding for years. What was this company actually for? If the pursuit of growth could nearly destroy everything, then growth could not be the point. Something had to change. After the layoffs, Chouinard did something unusual. He took a group of his managers to Patagonia, the actual region in Argentina, to walk in the mountains and ask what kind of company they wanted to be. The answer they came back with reshaped everything. They decided the company would deliberately limit its own growth. It would grow only as fast as it could, without losing what made it good, and never for growth's own sake. Chouinard started saying a line that horrified other executives, that endless growth was the enemy, the same logic that drives a cancer cell and an overextended economy alike. He modeled his company on nature instead of on Wall Street. Slow, resilient, built to last centuries, rather than to spike and crash. It would make fewer, better things, and it would tell customers to buy less, not more. It sounded like a recipe for going broke. In practice, it did the opposite. Freed from the pressure to chase every quarter, Patagonia became more loyal, more trusted, and quietly more profitable than ever. The new philosophy needed teeth, and Chouinard gave it some. Back in 1985, he had started giving away 10% of profits to small grassroots environmental groups, the unglamorous local outfits fighting to protect a river or a forest. He soon reframed it as something bigger, not charity but a cost of doing business. A self-imposed earth tax. The company committed to give 1% of total sales, not profits sales, to environmental causes every single year, whether it was profitable or not. In 2002, Chouinard went further and co-founded an organization called 1% for the Planet, inviting other companies to make the same pledge. Over the following years, Patagonia would give away hundreds of millions of dollars. The logic was blunt and unsentimental. Every business takes resources from the planet and gives back waste. The least a company could do was pay rent for the damage. It was the kind of idea that sounds radical right up until the moment a successful company proves it can actually afford it. In the early 90s, Patagonia commissioned a study of the environmental cost of the fabrics it used. The results were ugly, and the worst offender was a surprise. Cotton. Not exotic synthetics, plain, natural cotton. Conventionally grown cotton turned out to be one of the most chemically poisoned crops on Earth, soaked in pesticides and defoliants that stripped the soil and sickened the land around it. Chouinard walked through a conventional cotton field and described the smell as nauseating, the earth around it dead. The company faced a brutal choice. It could keep using the cheap cotton everyone else used, or it could switch entirely to organic cotton, which was scarce, expensive, and barely available at the scale it needed. Chouinard chose the hard road. He gave the company 18 months to convert every cotton product to organic, with no exceptions and no going back. It meant tracking down farmers, building a supply chain that barely existed, and raising prices. Sportswear executives thought it was insane. By 1996, every piece of cotton the company sold was organic. On Black Friday in 2011, the biggest shopping day of the American year, Patagonia ran a full-page ad in the New York Times. It showed one of its best-selling fleece jackets above 3 words that no retailer in their right mind prints on that day. "Don't buy this jacket." The ad went on to explain the true cost of making it, the water, the carbon, the waste, and asked customers to think hard before buying anything they didn't need, to repair what they already owned instead of replacing it. It sounded like a stunt, and critics called it one, but Chouinard meant it. The company built a program called Worn Wear to repair old gear, resell used items, and keep clothing out of landfills as long as possible. The strange thing was what happened next. Telling people to buy less made them trust the brand more, and sales kept rising anyway. Patagonia had stumbled onto a truth most companies refuse to believe. You can build enormous loyalty by being honest about your own product, even when honesty costs you a sale. By now, Patagonia was proof of a larger argument. Chouinard had always worried that good intentions don't survive a founder. A future owner, a board, a buyer chasing returns could undo decades of restraint overnight. So he worked to bake the values into the structure itself. In 2012, Patagonia became one of the first companies in California to register as a benefit corporation, a legal form that requires a business to consider its impact on workers, communities, and the environment, not just its shareholders. It became a certified B Corporation, audited on its social and environmental performance. The company offered on-site childcare, paid environmental internships, and bailed out employees arrested at peaceful protests. None of this was marketing bolted on the side. It was written into how the company was legally allowed to behave. Chouinard had spent his life resisting the idea that a business exists only to make money. Now the resistance was structural. But there was one threat that no corporate charter could solve: the simple fact that Yvon Chouinard would not run the company forever. By his 80s, Chouinard was sitting on an uncomfortable fortune. Patagonia was worth around $3 billion, and Forbes had put him on its list of billionaires, a label he openly hated. He had never wanted to be rich. He drove old cars, wore battered clothes, and felt embarrassed by the wealth on paper. Now he and his family had to decide what would happen to the company when he was gone, and every conventional option was poison. They could sell to another corporation, but a new owner would almost certainly gut the values to boost profit. They could take the company public on the stock market, but Chouinard believed going public would put quarterly earnings ahead of the planet, destroying everything in the name of share price. He had watched it happen to other mission-driven companies again and again. The family could simply inherit it and become billionaires several times over. But that too betrayed the point. For 2 years, Chouinard and a small circle of advisors searched for a fourth path, a way to keep the company alive, keep its mission intact, and refuse to cash in. What they landed on had almost no precedent. In September of 2022, Chouinard and his family announced their answer. They gave the entire company away. The ownership was split into 2 parts. A small slice carrying all the voting power went into a trust designed to lock the mission in place forever, guided by the family and their closest advisors. The other 98%, all the economic value, went to a newly created nonprofit built to fight the environmental crisis. From that point on, every dollar of profit that Patagonia does not reinvest in the business flows to that nonprofit and out into the world to protect the planet. Roughly $100 million a year. The Chouinards took no windfall. They paid taxes on the transfer rather than dodging them, and walked away from billions they could easily have kept. In a letter to the world, Chouinard explained it simply. Instead of going public, Patagonia was going purpose. The company would keep operating exactly as before, making jackets, repairing gear, paying its people. But now it worked for one owner alone. He wrote the line that would travel around the world. Earth is now our only shareholder. It started with a teenager and a coal forge, making climbing spikes because the ones for sale weren't good enough. It became one of the most admired companies on Earth, and then its founder refused to own it. Along the way, Yvon Chouinard broke almost every rule business is supposed to run on. He killed his best product to protect the rock. He told customers to buy less. He called growth the enemy and gave away a fortune he never wanted. And the company did not collapse. It thrived. The lesson Patagonia leaves behind is uncomfortable for a lot of people, because it suggests the choice between doing good and doing well was never as absolute as we were told. A blacksmith who hated business built something that will outlive him and pointed it at the one problem he thought mattered most. Patagonia was, in the end, built from nothing and then handed to everyone. If this story changed how you think about what a company can be, subscribe. There are more builds like it here.